Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so when you think of the Maldives, you probably picture, luxury resorts, those amazing overwater bungalows, just pristine beaches everywhere, right? Well, beneath that postcard-perfect surface, this nation is actually battling a severe structural cost of living crisis. Today, we're unpacking the Maldives' Draft 2026 Policy Blueprint. It's this fascinating, sweeping strategy aimed at totally redesigning how an island nation survives and thrives in the modern economy. It's incredibly rare to see a country basically re-engineer its entire economic foundation from the ground up. But hey, that's exactly what's happening here.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, the Paradise Price Tag. Second, powering up and eating local. Third, smarter subsidies. Fourth, connecting the island atolls. Fifth, building true financial resilience. And finally, number 6, the roadmap to relief. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The Paradise Price Tag, Structural Realities.
To really grasp the proposed solutions in this draft strategy, we've got to first look at the Paradise Paradox. The Maldives faces a staggering structural vulnerability. We're talking about a trade deficit of over $3 billion. I mean, $3 billion! Why is it so high? Well, it's because the nation relies almost entirely on imports for pretty much everything. Food, fuel, construction materials, medicines, you name it. When you literally have to ship every single thing across the ocean, you are entirely at the mercy of global supply chains. So if a geopolitical event causes a sudden spike in global oil prices halfway around the world, it instantly means Maldivians might struggle to afford basic electricity or everyday staple foods. That extreme dependency, that is the absolute root of their cost of living crisis.
Now, there's also a massive geographical divide hidden behind the nation's overall GDP. Look, luxury tourism heavily drives the national economy and brings in serious foreign exchange, absolutely. But that wealth is incredibly uneven. The reality for families living out in the remote outer atolls is starkly different from those living in the capital city of Male. Because everything has to be transported via smaller boats across vast stretches of ocean, families in those outer islands end up paying extreme premiums just to get, say, a basic bag of rice or a tank of cooking gas. It's a deeply localized crisis where your geography literally dictates your inflation rate. And honestly, a problem like that demands a highly localized structural solution.
Section 2. Powering up and eating local. Pillars 1 and 2. So, the core objective of the very first pillar is radically reducing the structural costs of energy. Right now, almost every single island relies on a loud, polluting, and frankly incredibly expensive imported diesel generator just to keep the lights on. Moving away from this, that's step 1. The strategy involves aggressively deploying solar arrays across resort islands, industrial zones, public buildings, the whole shebang. But the real game changer here is deploying massive battery storage to create dedicated, self-sustaining microgrids specifically for those outer atolls. This transition isn't just about going green or being eco-friendly. Breaking free from imported diesel is a matter of absolute economic survival for these communities.
But generating power differently is really only half the battle. Smarter utilities are just as vital. So the blueprint plans to introduce time-of-use tariffs right alongside a nationwide rollout of smart meters. Basically, this uses clever pricing to shift consumer demand away from those super expensive peak hours. Think about it. Imagine running your washing machine or heavy appliances at, say, 2 p.m. when solar energy is abundant and incredibly cheap, rather than at 7 p.m. when the grid is totally strained and relying on backup power. It just makes sense. It reduces overall system waste, and it makes household utility bills far more manageable and predictable.
Moving on to Pillar 2. To tackle the crippling cost of imported food, the strategy proposes investing heavily in local agriculture and fisheries. And you might wonder, why is this so critical right now? Well, think about the current pain points. Right now, a local fisherman might bring in an absolutely phenomenal catch, but without proper ice and cold storage, what the industry calls the cold chain, that food spoils before it ever even reaches the market. It's heartbreaking. So by funding vital cold chain investments, deploying high-tech hydroponic farming in urban areas, and giving direct microgrants to empower island farming cooperatives, the state is aiming to secure its own food supply from within.
But what about the essentials that you absolutely do have to import? How do you lower those landed costs? Well, you have to completely overhaul the logistics. This part of the strategy lays out a dynamic master plan to end supply chain vulnerability once and for all. Instead of all these fragmented independent purchases by different merchants, the government is going to centralize the bulk buying of staples like rice and flour to secure massive discounts. From there, they'll store these goods in newly constructed regional warehousing hubs scattered across the atolls and aggressively optimize the shipping routes. This definitively prevents those sudden, scary price spikes and stops remote islands from running out of food during rough weather.
Section 3. Smarter subsidies and safety nets targeting support.
Right now, the government is spending an absolute fortune keeping prices artificially low for everyone across the board, which, as you can guess, is completely unsustainable. The document proposes a major and honestly very necessary shift from these expensive universal blanket subsidies over to targeted support. Just think about the logic here for a second. A highly profitable luxury resort or a high-end penthouse definitely shouldn't be receiving the exact same subsidized electricity rate as a struggling family just trying to make ends meet, right? By utilizing national ID and income data, the government can actually implement means testing. I know, it sounds like dry policy, but in reality, it's a financial lifesaver that prevents state bankruptcy while actively increasing the protection and funds available for low-income households.
To ensure absolute transparency during this massive economic transition, the government plans to set up a step-by-step protection mechanism. First off, they're going to launch a public, real-time price dashboard monitoring essentials like flour, gas, and water across the entire country. And this isn't just about collecting data for the sake of it. It's about putting power back into the hands of citizens. It empowers a dedicated consumer protection unit to quickly spot unnatural market spikes and then ruthlessly investigate any price gouging or market collusion that might be happening out in isolated communities.
Section 4. Connecting the Island Atolls. Service Digitalization. This section tackles the sheer geographical nightmare of the Maldives. We really have to consider the massive human toll and the indirect costs of living scattered across hundreds of islands. I mean, if a citizen in an outer atoll needs to see a specialized doctor or even just needs a standard government permit signed, they currently have to endure the stress and the staggering cost of chartering a boat, taking a seaplane, or sitting on a bumpy overnight ferry all the way to Male. By co-financing highly efficient public ferry networks and aggressively expanding digital services like telehealth and e-government platforms, this blueprint aims to drastically remove that expensive barrier of physical travel entirely. It's a huge quality of life upgrade.
Section 5. Building true financial resilience. Household income.
Here, the strategy pivots beautifully. It moves from large-scale national infrastructure right down to the individual household wallet. The blueprint breaks this into a defensive and an offensive strategy, which I love. On the defensive side, they're aiming to enforce credit discipline by actively regulating predatory payday-style loans that just trap vulnerable citizens in endless cycles of high-interest debt. Then, on the offensive side, they want to empower everyday people to tap into the nation's wealth. By facilitating digital remote work and supporting micro-enterprises, think independent local guiding, sustainable crafts, home-based culinary businesses, ordinary citizens can secure brand new revenue streams directly from that lucrative tourism economy.
Section 6. The Roadmap to Relief. Implementation Phases. So, the big question. How does this ambitious draft actually move from just a piece of paper to an everyday reality? Well, the implementation roadmap outlines 3 distinct phases, building up kind of like the exciting climax of a master plan. Phase 1 is all about immediate triage and urgency, getting those pilot microgrids running and those price dashboards live within the very first 12 months. Phase 2, which stretches from year 1 to 3, focuses on scaling up the infrastructure, actually constructing those vital regional warehousing hubs, and rolling out smart meters nationwide. And finally, Phase 3 aims for the grand vision, achieving a majority renewable energy share across the entire country within 7 years. It's ambitious, for sure.
But to ensure this actually happens, the government is holding itself strictly accountable using 5 key indicators. And they aren't just looking at boring macroeconomics here. They are tracking the nationwide share of renewables and the localized food price index right alongside actual household disposable income. It perfectly bridges the gap between massive national policy shifts and the reality of a family's everyday utility bills. So accountability is fundamentally built right into the design of the strategy.
We are looking at an incredibly vulnerable country taking aggressive, highly structured steps to insulate itself from a deeply unpredictable world. And it leaves us with a really critical thought to ponder. As climate and economic shocks continue to escalate globally, is this island nation's blueprint just a local solution, or is it a preview of the economic survival guide that we are all going to need? Thanks for exploring this explainer with me today, and as always, keep questioning the systems around you.